Welcome back. MTG Joe here. Today we are back in order. My PC decided to die on me. My hard drive failed, had to restore everything. But thankfully, I'm rocking the cloud today because all my settings were somehow saved for OBS. Was worried I had to recreate that. But do let me know in this video if the audio is kind of off, if anything seems a little bit weird. It seems okay on my end, but we're using this kind of as a test video as well. Make sure we're up and running, all things back to normal. But we're going to be covering our first installment of the weekly metagame breakdown for the Timeless best of one format. Some folks have been asking for it. Apologies between COVID and the PC breaking. It's been a bad 2 weeks for content, but we are back. So we are going to jump right into it. We notably had an alchemy drop yesterday, I believe it was. So we are going to have to look September 24th through to today, October 16th. So almost a month, basically since the release of Duskmourn. Untapped usually waits a couple days until we can see like the new meta. I doubt many of the cards, if any, from the alchemy we'll see play. There's the new 3-drop 7/7 that can be unearthed or reanimated pretty well. I've been playing it in historic. It's been pretty solid in like an Oculus deck, but we're gonna take a look, see what people have been playing since Duskmourn thus far. If you want to use Untapped to track your win rates, where we're getting the stats from today, it's in the video description. And as always, we will paste these deck lists into the video description so you can copy paste to your heart's content. So we're going to start with popularity of the day, and then we'll jump into the deck lists themselves. 4-color show and tell is the most popular at about 20%. Mardu Energy 13, Boros at about 10. The Reanimator decks. This can be a mashup between like legit Reanimator. We're seeing like Valgavoth being played in some of those, and then the Phoenix, Vampire, Reanimator, Oops All Combos kind of deck that's also included in there. So we'll take a look at that. And then Dimir Frog at 3.7%. So we're going to look Diamond and Mythic rank, 11,000 games of best of one were played over this span. Highest win rate deck is Dimir Frog, 83%, 35 games. So this is a Lurrus variant. We're going to be looking right after just a comparison to a non-Lurrus version that's playing Oculus as well. Slightly lower win rate, not the most sequential, but give you an idea in terms of comparison. So this deck here, if we're looking at in terms of threats first, so it's not the full Dimir Mistman control deck that's just playing Bowmasters and requires the patience of a saint to actually close out a game. This deck's got Tamiyo that's very effective against kind of the go wide decks, your energy deck, stuff like that with its plus. Very easy to flip with Brainstorm, Treasure Cruise, even just Frog Bobble can flip it at times, depending on how you time things. But this will flip. You have Psychic Frog, Legacy, Modern, All-Star at this point, Bowmasters as your main threats, and you have a couple Nethergoyfs in here as well. Fatal Push, you have Spell Pierce, Stern Scolding, Thoughtseizes Hand Disruption, Mana Drain, and Drown in the Lock as counters. Thinking Stupor as kind of a bounce style effect. You can interact with it on the stack, which is nice as well. And then Treasure Cruise for some hand fill. Mystic Sanctuary can rebuy your spells. Lurrus Companion in that respect. So like I mentioned, not the most sequential in terms, but just gives you another idea. This one's at 62%. So this version here, it's more a little bit self-mill focused. We have a couple Overlord of the Bale Marks. So you can cast this for 2 mana. Comes in as an enchantment with basically like 5 time counters that you remove at your end step. So when it enters or attacks, you mill 4. You can return a creature or planeswalker to your hand. So this will allow you to self-mill, kind of self-mill over the Abhorrent Oculus. Then you have Unearth in this deck as opposed to Reanimate. So saves you a little bit on life. All your threats, whether it be like the Psychic Frogs, Bowmasters, Picklock Pranksters, all can kind of work in that respect. So similar to like the setup I've been running in Historic as well. You have some Hand Hate, Inquisition, your still Fatal Push. Consider in here just puts cards into your graveyard, some Spell Pierces Disruption, a couple Mana Drains. This one seems a little softer to like Show and Tell. You just have less interactive spells to deal with Show and Tell. You do have things like Flare Denial for a free counter, but you'd have to kind of sack a reasonable threat in that regard. And then no companion in this version here. So for this show and tell list, I don't know. Every time I click a show and tell list, it untaps like we've had enough of it. Stop showing show and tell. But this list here is kind of an interesting one. It does have the combo variant. We sometimes see versions that are just no combo in the context that you'll use like Waterlog Teaching to fetch up either Hullbreaker Horror since it has Flash, or you have Atraxa as your predominant win conditions. This version here has no Atraxa whatsoever, which is interesting. So your show and telling, you have your Masterminds, gets the Bonds of Insight. Bonds of Insight gets you back Masterminds. Mastermind can get you back like Scholar of Ages. You kind of just chain it together and eventually get your Approach the Second Sun, win that way there, kind of a variant. So you kind of have those loops there. Leyline of Sanctity main as a protection effect from discard, burn, Belcher, stuff like that. Digs in here, just a lot of ways to kind of dig for your combo. You have Consider and Brainstorm, so a lot more cheap draw. Born Upon the Winds for instant speed wins, and then a Veil of Summer protection in that respect. Moving on, we go to Boros Energy, 75%. So this should be a Luris version. So we're going to add a Luris to this deck because they forgot to. And Luris is legal with this shell, so we're going to add it because Luris is a good card. So 75%. Kind of cool card that's seeing play in this shell is Arabella Abandoned Doll. 2 mana, 1/3. When it attacks, deals X damage, and you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. This deck can go very wide with Ocelote's Pride as a way to make a bunch of tokens. Johnny making tokens, stuff like that. So this gives you another angle of attack. In races, can deal huge chunks of damage. Pair that with like Arena Glory, and it's a pretty sweet combination there. One thing I'd say is that this list, you don't need Aether Hub in the non-Jingantha versions because you're not trying to get to 3 mana for the Amped Raptor. Makes your mana base worse. You just play more Inspiring Vantages, or you can play the Surveil lands in here as well. All are good utility lands to play in that respect. You can play more fetches if you want. There's a little bit ways to kind of improve the mana base, but Energy Shell that we've seen time and time again. Johnny's, Bombardments, Ocelote's Pride, Guide of Souls, Amped Raptors, your core, full set of Regavans, Static Prison, Swords to Plowshare in here as well. Then go to a Mardu variant, very close in terms of win rate. So this version here is on Luris. The main difference with this one, it's got a little bit of a sacrifice sub-theme. You have Marionette's Apprentice that can drain out your opponent. Juggernaut Peddler is like a Thoughtseize style effect, pairing with actual Thoughtseize. Nightmare can recycle and rebuy your stuff. Bombardment plays nice, just extra pings with the Marionette. Inquisition has some cheap hand hate. And then just kind of a mix of your threats. It's interesting here, only one Static Prison. Static Prison's good in best of one, given that you can hit show and tell when they cheat it into play. Otherwise, you don't really have much recourse against the show and tell unless you hate their hand in a particular way. So interesting kind of setup in terms of some of these cards that are being included here. We go to Belcher, 74%. This deck's nothing super new. I think we're just mainboarding a Force of Vigor right now, which is reasonable against show and tell mirrors. Belcher mirrors gives you a chance to interact with them potentially. Your lands all serve as green spells, so lots of things to kind of pitch in that regard there. With the reset, it shows you which cards you have, which you don't, and I usually have this unchecked just for views, but with the reset on my PC, mess that up. Core of this deck, you're just kind of Dark Ritualing, ramping up, playing Belcher, winning that way there. You have Beseech lines where you can like Ironcrag Feet, generate enough mana for Belcher. You can Beseech into Channel to generate enough mana. A few different ways to win through that vein. Then go to Mardu Phoenix. So this list here is like, oops, all combos. Dark Ritual is a pretty strong card. Dark Ritual into Sorin, into Cheat to play Elenda or Vein Ripper or Olivia. You can Dark Ritual, so you can strike it rich, Dark Ritual into Buried Alive to get 3 Phoenix to get him out on turn 1. You can use Surgical as a way to get a free spell in that regard. Faceless Looting can help you with a Reanimate line if you want to bring back any of these fatties. Olivia can also reanimate. So a lot of different ways to kind of play with that. Collective Brutality is a way to kind of eat away at their hands and discard for value as well. Deck usually plays around 13 to 14 lands. Very mulligan focus deck. Personally, this deck's never worked for me. I know a lot of people do well with it. It's just this deck doesn't vibe with me. I don't know. I just always I'll like turn 1 3 Phoenix and they just find like a way to beat me still somehow, and it annoys me. But I know this deck people like it. If you like kind of combos, this is very much a deck with many combo lines to it. That requires very tight play. Jund Breach, so 70% win rate, 20 games on this one. So this is an Underworld Breach deck that you're looking to basically loop together Dark Rituals with like Stitcher Suppliers, Dragon Rage Chandlers to fill your graveyard. Diabolic Intent can then also help feed by sacking the Stitcher to generate more cards in your graveyard to keep the Dark Ritual chain going. This deck's got gambles that you can throw stuff into the graveyard. We have a new card. Really annoying that Noxious Revival is a mythic to craft. But this is another free spell. Free spells are good in the deck, just kind of building up your storm counts. Lets you rebuy cards as well that are relevant. This one's got some Beseech to help you tutor as well. And then Wishclaw Talisman in here. Some of these lists, so this is just strict Rakdos. There's a Jund version that's using Malavant Rumbling. Like, it's technically got a green card, but you're never actually paying the cost. The Malavant kind of mill card also kind of fuels these decks, but Rakdos version's got a little bit higher win rate since then. 5-color Reanimator, so 67%. So this is another, not like as Oops All combo. You're playing a massive 18 lines in this one, but same lines, Dark Ritual into Sorin, into Saint Elenda or Vein Ripper. And then you also have just like Insolent Neonate. Interesting, no Faithless Looting in this version. I would think Faithless Looting is a little bit more consistent than the Neonate. It makes you weaker against Bowmaster, but it gives you more card density. You also have like Grief that can be reanimated, but you throw one of these fatties in, you reanimate it. You also have access with the blue mana to Stubborn Denial. Additionally, if you're going to be playing blue in this deck anyways, you can also look at just playing Psychic Frog as another alternative. It's a better overall creature that does a similar pitch effect, and then it can be a more fair win condition that refills your hand as well. Surgicals, Thought Seizes, Reanimates, there. All the big best beaters in the top end. Then go to Jund Delirium. They're calling it Jund Shadow, but there's no shadows here. 64% on this particular list. This is a deck that is Lyris Companion. You want to establish Delirium for more card types using stuff like Patchwork Beastie, that's multiple types that helps you self-mill. Once Upon a Time, Fear Missing Out can give you extra combat steps, which is really nice with these fairly large creatures in terms of like Nethergoyf can get pretty big in this deck. Honestly, even like a 3-3 attacking a couple times is pretty good. Dragon Rage is likely going to be a 3-3 with flying quite often. And then Amtraptor kind of cascades you into this here. Arena Glory can haste out the fear of missing out. Lightning Bolts, bunch discard in this deck. And then Fatal Push as cheap interaction. We then go to Jeskai. They're calling it Energy, but it's like a Winota shell. Another kind of cool deck here that's playing some new cards. This one's at 60%. Still relatively reasonable for best of one. I usually try to cap it at like 55. But some interesting card choices. So it's built around Winota Joiner of Forces. This cares about whenever you attack with non-humans, you get to reveal cards and basically cheat into play humans. The big hit off it is Agent of Treachery. That can get you steal like your opponent's lands, key cards, stuff like that. Incidentally, it's also just like a sneaky good card against show and tell, just to steal their omniscience or track so that they cheat into play. We have a couple new cards. So we also have the Arabella here. We have the Split Skin Dolls. 2 mana, 2/1. It's a toy. So it works with triggering with Noda. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, then discard a card unless you control another creature. So it could just be flat out card draw in this deck. The Lootmonger is a human, so it's one of the hits that you can get. Ajani makes multiple bodies for Winota, which is nice. Delny triggers multiple times. Kind of interesting, only like 2 Oscillot's Pride. I'd rather just play the full set over Nurturing Pixie than just like some cheap creatures. Deafening Silence for show and tell, Source Pusher, some. I like the general idea here. I think the probably be tighter in terms of some of the creatures. You don't necessarily want to play Amped Raptor here because you do have some fail that can occur. Also, the mana base is a little sketchy with this one here. Looks like it's somewhat of a budget-focused mana base, but things like Sundown Pass, Cliff cards you would play in the deck. A little bit more budgety, newer, probably like a newer deck to format. And then lastly, we have one from the community. This is Budget Jetstorm. They went 29 and 14. This is by Sock Monster 13. So one thing with this here, it looks like they played a best of 3 version and best of 1, meaning that you don't need these green sources. So if you want to save 5 wild cards, you can just play more swamps. A full 4 Phyrexian Tower is kind of interesting. It does have diminishing returns being a legendary land. It doesn't tap for black mana. For this deck, Dark Ritual into Necropotence gets you a whole bunch of cards. With Jet Medallion, you have a bunch of cost-reduced creatures. So with Marionette out or Meathook Massacre, you can use Cthulhian Nightmare to keep rebuying either Greedy Freebooters or Shambling Gas back. So one in play, one in your graveyard, you keep buying them back. It generates a treasure, you get Nightmare back, you can cast it again, and keep looping it and drain your opponent. Wait there. Back there. That's it for the week. Let me know what you think. Let me know how the quality of the video is, and we'll hopefully be back to our regular selected content. Hopefully no more service interruptions for the stream. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one. Stay safe.